Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We are here in the Heartland holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. It is another fun Saturday because we are going to be talking about vision quests and finding ourselves through that. And we have an awesome guest today that Patrick is going to tell us about.
So today we have Tom Anderson, and he works with an organization called Rites of Passage, which began in the 1970s, and it's devoted to reintroducing the rite of passage to people of diverse backgrounds who are living in our contemporary world. And so you can find out more information about them at wildernessquest.org. Tom, are you with us today? Hi, Tom. Are you there? All right. Well, we may be having just a little bit of technical difficulties today getting connected. If you give us just a moment, we will get Tom back on with us.
And while we are looking for Tom out there somewhere in the ethers, we're going to talk to you a little bit about Vision Quest. So if you've never heard of a Vision Quest before, it is this idea where you go out, usually alone, and it could be one day, it could be 2 days, it could be longer. Some people have you out on this vision quest for days. We are so bombarded, right, with everything from technology to music. It's just nonstop. And so I think all of us seriously could use a vision quest just to get away from the noise, to get quiet, and that's when the answers come. So if you have never been on a vision quest, Tom is going to actually talk about the company that he founded, which is totally dedicated to helping people go on this vision quest and find themselves. So as we're waiting to connect with Tom out there somewhere in the ethers, let's talk a little about what's going on in the world today.
Tom, are you with us?
I'm on.
Oh, okay, great. Did we lose you there for a moment?
Yeah, the line went dead a couple of times in the past couple of minutes as we were trying to get on together.
So let me see. So you work with the organization Rites of Passage, and you describe it as a wilderness quest. And so a lot of people talk about a vision quest. I've heard about a vision quest. How is a wilderness quest different than a vision quest?
Well, in the broad, so I give you a little background on it. The idea of a wilderness-based sort of time of seeking is something that is pan-cultural, and there is some version of this sort of a process that has been practiced for thousands of years throughout the world in all sorts of cultures. In this country, in the North American continent, the term vision quest is often associated with a particular Native American sort of a tradition that varies a little from one tribe to another, but has been practiced, in North America for a long time. And as I would say those of us involved in Rites of Passage, as we've gone through this through the years, we've become more sensitive to sometimes cultural appropriation issues. And while there were a number of Native American teachers that the founders of Rites of Passage and the current executive director of Rites of Passage have studied with and learned from over the years, we decided really just in the past year or so that we wanted to be a little cleaner with our language and to make sure that we weren't in a space of, because a lot of people would have questions. It's like, well, is this a Native American program? If so, do you guys have the sort of the moral authority to do this or not? And so we just wanted to make it a little bit more distinct in terms of what we were doing versus, some other types of ceremonies that have happened in the past. So It is. We have called this in the past a vision quest. We are choosing not to call it that today, and do everything we can to make sure that we're giving the right sort of credit where it's due to our teachers of all sorts of backgrounds, and to also make it clear that this is a process and a ceremony really for the modern age. It's for people that are living in the modern world, dealing with the sorts of things that a lot of us deal with every day in our lives, and being of service to people that are seeking and looking for ways to go through personal healing, to find a deeper level of purpose and meaning in their lives, and just a number of other sort of applications that people come out looking for support on.
So I think a lot of people may be familiar with the term vision quest if they're familiar with Native American culture at all. But how did all this get started? I'm always interested in how these kinds of things get going. Mm-hmm.
So the version that we offer at Rites of Passage was really started back in the 70s. A man by the name of Stephen Foster, along with his wife, Meredith Little, started the nonprofit organization Rites of Passage. And in the early days, it was a lot of sort of exploring on their own. He was going through some life changes at the time, spent a lot of time, this was in California, in the Bay Area, and he would spend a lot of time in the desert and Death Valley in the wintertime, and high desert environments in the summer. Just off alone, and starting to sort of put together some ideas about what this sort of thing might look like. And then in the early days, there was a Native American teacher by the name of Hiamea Storm who came along and offered some tools. Said, if you're going to do this work, there's a couple of things that would be of help to you, and he offered those. And Stephen and Meredith learned from Hiamea and some other Native American teachers. And then in the early days, it was primarily designed to be a program for youth. In Sonoma County in California, where they were based at the time, they had gotten some grants to do work with at-risk youth, and they were taking youth trips several times a year, and sort of 16, 17-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids out on these programs. And then a lot of adults around were watching what was happening with the kids' parents and others, and saying, well, I'd like to try that. And so they started developing programs for adults. And today, Rites of Passage still offers at least one youth trip a year. There's a school in Sonoma County that Rites of Passage goes in and does one and sometimes two trips a year for juniors and seniors. Reports are that it is really changed the culture of the school over the years, with a number of students that have gone through the program. And then there's a number of adult programs that are offered throughout the year as well.
Wow. Well, I would certainly be interested in, doing something like that. And I did mention the website briefly, but, if people are already and they have their interest piqued, how do you get involved in something like that? And how did you get involved in this?
Well, I got involved because in my mid-40s, this was in 2006, I was at a crossroads in my life. I was in the commercial mortgage banking business, and I had been working for a small company for a number of years and was on a path. I was a leader in the organization, and I knew that I was on a path there that eventually I could step into ownership of the company. And one morning I was in my office sitting at my desk doing my job, and the owner of the company came in and he said, Tom, I want you to know this morning I had a meeting with an attorney, and I've hired him to start putting together some paperwork that will get us started on the path of you becoming a partner here in the firm. And in many ways, it was like this perfect opportunity. It was everything that I thought I had been working for years. And I sort of said something, well, thanks, that's great. So let me know when you're ready to sit down and talk about this. And he left my office, and my heart, there was nothing there. There was no sense of joy. There was no spark. There was no sense of, there was nothing but just emptiness. And I thought, what in the world? This is what I thought I wanted. And here I am at this crossroad moment. Here I am at this at the start of something new and exciting, potentially, at least based on the way I would have thought about it the day before, perhaps. And I'm sitting here now thinking, I don't want this. And that led me to a moment of, well, if it's not that, then what am I doing with my life? And I will say I had a pretty good life. I was making, I had a good living. I had a career. I had a wife and kids, wonderful family, all the trappings, all the things that says sort of, upper middle class success. And I realized this isn't satisfying. It's not all I am. It's not all that I am meant to be and to give and to do in the world. And as luck or as spirit or would have it, within about 2 weeks, I got an email from somebody I knew in the real estate business, and it was sort of an end of year. Here's what we've done. Here's thanks to all of our customers and our clients and my team members, and one of those typical sort of end of year reports that somebody might send out to their contacts. And at the very end of it, it said, as usual, we're not giving corporate holiday gifts. Instead, we're making a donation this year to the Rites of Passage Scholarship Fund. I thought, well, what is that? And so I Googled it, went online and found the Rites of Passage website and started reading on the website about what they did and this idea of a quest. And I thought, that's it. That's what I need to do. I saw they had a 9-day program going off into the wilderness. I'd always loved camping. I'd spent a lot of time in doing outdoor activities already, and I thought that's what I need to do. I need to go off and sit on a mountain someplace for 3 or 4 days, just by myself, just with my thoughts, and figure all this out and come back and be ready to say yes to this new opportunity. And so in the summer of 2006, right on my 45th birthday, I went off and did one of these programs. And it was life-changing. And one of the things that I really felt strongly about when I came home was, I don't know if this is all that I'm supposed to be, but I know I'm supposed to learn how to be a guide on one of these programs. And so I reached back out to Mike Bodkin, who was one of the leaders in the trip and is the director of the organization. And I said, I want to come learn this craft. And there's a guide training program that Rites of Passage offers. And I started the training program. And then I started offering weekend versions of the program more locally in the area where I live in Kansas City. And then a couple of years later, Mike and I started doing trips in Colorado together. And so once a year, I still have a full-time job that has nothing to do with doing quests, but once a year, I go off and I co-lead a program. And we're currently, the program I'm co-leading is a men's trip in Colorado, usually in late June. And so it was a search for something for myself that started me down the path, and it led me to finding this joy and this way that I can give to others what I have received, and just sort of stay in that cycle of giving and receiving.
Well, yeah, that's an amazing story, and I think a lot of people can relate to having that kind of a cathartic experience where you just have this sense inside like, oh my gosh, everything outside says that I'm supposed to be successful. I've arrived. It's everything that I've worked for. And then inside you realize, wow, maybe I've just made a huge mistake. And, and I hear that story so many times, and it's really interesting because, we grow up and our parents are kind of guiding us in a direction many times that they think is going to be for our best interest because they want us to have financial stability and security and all of these things. And so, they are guiding us toward, becoming an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor, whatever it is they think will make us happy and secure, thinking, oh, security financially is going to lead to happiness. But then inside, something just we kind of reach our breaking point, I think, where we feel like we just have to take action and do something. So right. I think it's awesome that you had the courage to do that, because here you were, so many people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, becoming a partner at the firm, that's it, you've arrived. And for you to just walk away from that is amazing. Go ahead.
No, well, what I was going to say is that, there's one way of sort of describing it, sort of a technical way of describing what the quest is, but it ties back to something that I think is key to understanding of this program and the power it can have. And one way of describing is the quest is a ceremonial reenactment of the monomyth as identified by Joseph Campbell of the what we call the hero's journey. And Campbell was a mythologist and a writer, and back in I think it was in the late 50s, he published a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And it's been around for a long time. A lot of people have read it, but he describes this sort of universal story that shows up, in cultures all over the world and has for thousands of years. And it's a story of just sort of an ordinary person going about their lives when something happens that gets their attention or causes some sort of a break in their normal day-to-day lives, and it sets this character off on a journey. And it's a journey of challenge and discovery, during which time they have to find and retrieve something that's been lost or stolen, that Campbell called the hero's boon, B-O-O-N, and then bring it back in service to their people. And oftentimes the hero, this character, goes off because there's something wrong with them. They've been injured. They've had something personal happen to them, and they go off on this journey. But what always is true in these stories is that which they find that they want for themselves is actually something they have to give away. It's actually something they have to come back and bring in service to someone or something other than themselves. And I didn't know. Frankly, I'd never read that until after I had done this program myself, and started looking at it. I thought, well, that's it. That's exactly what this is. It's the sense of everything's great, but everything's not. And so what's the deal here? And how do I fill in that missing piece? We have what I have noticed over the years, and I've been leading these for 10, 11 years now, and I've checked this with others that are guides as well, and they concur with this. We tend to get folks that are maybe in their 20s, mid to late 20s. Sometimes it's, the typical scenario is somebody in a young man who's gone off to college. He's got his degree. Maybe he's got his first job, and he's kind of stepping into, the patterns that maybe he saw his parents go through in their lives. And he's out working in the world. He's out doing something that he was educated to do, and finding it not to be complete. There's something missing. And sometimes we'll get people like that will come out. Then we also get a lot of people that are sort of like I was, sort of in the middle of their lives, have all that they thought they wanted, and something's not complete. And then we oftentimes get, particularly on the men's trip, we get men that are maybe at or nearing retirement, when they are facing another crossroads in their lives where, I've been a lawyer or an accountant or I've been in the insurance business for 40 years, and now I'm not doing that anymore. So if I'm not that, who am I? What am I? How do I discover who I truly am so that I can spend the rest of my life, this last third of my life or whatever it might be, in service to something bigger than myself? And so it's just constantly this recurring story of, seeking something to fill a gap, or to feel this sense of healing and completion.
Well, that goes right along with our mission, because our mission for our station and our show is spiritual solutions for everyday living. And so Kathryn and I, both are working with people, helping them connect with their spirituality. So that definitely goes right along with this. And that does seem like there's this missing piece that people have, that in general terms, we call it spirituality, but I have more come to consider it like a connection to something bigger than us, something deeper, being part of something bigger. And I love Joseph Campbell's work, his work with the hero's journey. I think that is a common theme when we look at all of the great stories. There's always this. It could be a hero or a heroine, but the basic plot line of the story is the same. They go on that journey like you described it. And so I really appreciate his work. Now, I noticed on the description of your program that you described it as pan-cultural. And I find that really interesting because, we talked about that just a little bit, but is this Native American, or how does all this come together? Is this something different?
So it's pan-cultural in that no matter what background someone brings to this, it is more of an empty vessel that they can bring their own sort of experiences, cultural, religious, spiritual, experience and context to it. It's pan-cultural in that this same sort of process. In the New Testament of the Bible, there's Jesus going off into the desert for 40 days and nights, and whether it's a literal wrestling with the desert or a metaphorical wrestling with the fighting with the devil, I choose to take the metaphorical approach, because I see people going off for 3 days and nights in the desert on our trips, wrestling with their own sorts of demons and their own sorts of versions of devils, and then coming back with the gift. So it shows up in that. A few years back, I wasn't part of it, but there was through Rites of Passage, there was a young man who was Orthodox Jewish, and he with Mike created a program specifically for his Orthodox Jewish community. And they came out and went through the same program, bringing their own prayers, their own symbols, their own, approach to the process. And having said all of that, because we do these programs in North America, and because the program is so tied to the natural environment and to the land that we do it on, in places like Colorado and Death Valley and the Owens Valley and the Inyo Mountains in California and those areas, because it cannot help but have some of that feeling of that I'm walking the ground that has been walked by people on this continent for a long time before the Western European culture showed up here. And so there are some ideas, there are some symbols that are brought in and offered as teaching tools, as as help or a guide that people might use as a framework. But we also, but the pan-cultural piece is that we really encourage people to pray the way that they pray, if they pray, to take their own sort of beliefs in the universe and their spirituality out with them when they go. On these programs, and to just to meet it, to meet the experience where they are, with whatever they've brought from their background when they show up. So yes, there is certainly some Native American influence. We use a framework called the medicine wheel. This was one of the things that Jaime Storm brought to Rites of Passage years ago. We use the medicine wheel, or the four directions wheel, as we call it, that has a framework for sort of understanding the self, and some metaphors that are attached to it, and archetypes, and one thing or other that help to frame the stories that people tell. But it's really the core of the program. It's a 9-day program. The heart of it is a 3-day solo and fast, and we offer people the opportunity to self-design their own ceremonies while they're out there. We give them some ideas of things they might do to help pass the time and to explore some parts of their stories that have showed up. But I really like to think of it as sort of this empty vessel that is big enough to hold whatever cultural references anybody might bring with them.
So, what are the logistics? Like, how does this work? What can somebody expect if they go on one of these wilderness quests with you?
Sure. The programs are typically 9 days.
And we are back from the break. If you are just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio. We are also simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. And we are rolling with the punches as we work through our technical difficulties. Thank you for sticking with us. We are here today with Tom Anderson, and the show is going on. And so we are going to pick up with what we were talking about just before we left. Tom, you were getting ready to walk us through the logistics of how this wilderness quest works and what people can expect when they join you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So it's typically a 9-day program. We start almost always on a Saturday afternoon with having all the participants show up and meet at a campground near where we're going to do the program. We spend Saturday afternoon there, Saturday night in the campground, and then Sunday we pack up and we head into a backcountry setting where we spend Sunday night, Monday as well. Tuesday morning is when we start the solos. Everybody gets up very early and we send them out at sunrise. They spend Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday out on their solo time. On Friday morning, they come back, and we spend Friday, Saturday, come back into sort of civilization, back to the campground for Saturday night, and then we close the program on Sundays. During the first roughly 3 days, the guide's role is basically to help the participants get ready for the solo, and we do that by helping them get ready on both the sort of the physical plane, teaching people we don't use tents in the backcountry. We set up tarps to sleep under and show people how to put up a tarp so that in a way that will keep them plenty dry if it should rain. We talk about, orienting oneself in the backcountry in case you get turned around and lost. What do you do? We talk about flora and fauna, sort of what kind of animals might you encounter, and if you do, what should you do in order to make sure you stay safe? We talk about, other sorts of things that people need to know if they're going to be in a wilderness setting by themselves for a couple of days. So that's and then also preparing people on the psychological, spiritual plane, listening to their stories. What brought you here? What is going on in your life that would make you want to come do this? What do you want for yourself out there? And then the job as the guides is to sort of mirror back what we're hearing and helping people to get some clarity before they head out of exactly what they want to quest for. What do they want to find? What do they want to affirm for themselves while they're out there on the 3 days and nights? Then when they come back, we spend the last 3 days sort of helping to unpack the experience. So the guides are there to hear the stories of, so you went out and what did you do? What did you experience? What did you think about? What did you see? When you saw that sunrise on the second morning, what did you feel? What did it remind you of? What did it reflect back about yourself? So we spend a lot of time in what we call in counsel, listening to their stories, and then we start a process called incorporation, which is basically helping the participants to, for themselves, decide, what do I want to take home with me from this? What do I want to? What do I now know to be true about myself that I want to be sure is showing up in my daily life? Do I want to make changes in my life? Did I go if somebody went out trying to make a decision about some life path? Are they ready now to make that decision? And if so, what will it be? And what kind of supports do they need in order to make those changes in their lives, helping them to identify those things. That's the logistics. It's Saturday to a Sunday. Usually, a lot of people take probably a day on either side of that to travel to the site, and another day, to get home again, or so, depending on where they're coming from and all. But that's the overall sort of outline, I guess you would say, of the program.
So I'm probably not the only one who didn't miss this, but you mentioned something about wild animals, and so the first thing in my mind is, yikes! Is this going to be safe?
Well, it's interesting. Usually, we always get at least one question from somebody as soon as they show up at the campground on Saturday afternoon. What about bears? Are there going to be bears out there? And in some of the locations we do programs. In the Colorado location where I lead programs, there's bears. And occasionally somebody will come back from their solo with a bear sighting story. They saw a bear off 100 yards away, walking away from them, or whatever the case may be. The reality is that first let me say this: in the 40-ish years that Rites of Passage has been doing these programs, there's actually only been one injury that ever occurred, and it was actually a young man who, in spite of the instructions not to do so, decided to take a little bit of marijuana with him, and then while high decided to try to climb up a cliff and fell off, and I think he broke an arm or something.
Oh, geez.
So it was a self-inflicted sort of. There has never been any kind of injury or even attack or anything else from animals. What we encourage people to do is to look at, so you're afraid of bears. So let's talk about what that means for you. What is it you're afraid of? And actually to then use, sort of dig into the fear that comes up. And it's natural. It happens with a lot of people. Not to tell them, well, that's silly. You shouldn't be afraid. It's okay. But to really just sort of lean in and say, okay, well, let's talk about that. And then we do give some practical advice. Well, what do you do if a bear comes into your camp and you don't want them around? And how do you handle that? And, and when do you know that, okay, this is too close. I need to go back to base camp, and I need to maybe get a little support here or some company, let's say. So yeah, it comes up in a lot of people's stories. And what's interesting is that there have been a couple of people on the trips that have had a sighting of a bear during their solo, and what they come back with is really a story of awe and wonder that is very different than what they might have thought they were going to come back with as a story of sort of fear and terror. Just having that sort of an encounter, even if it's from a very long distance away, of seeing a wild animal natural in its habitat, and then well, what is that? What do I have? What if the bear is in me? And what does that bear have to tell me just through this experience? What might I learn about myself that is important to me right now at this place in my life?
So I think we've all probably heard this, and we might be able to dispel a myth, because I'd always heard growing up that if you ever encounter a bear in the woods, that you need to curl up into a ball, and then the bear won't bother you. Is there any truth to that? And would a bear even really be interested in us if they encountered us out in the woods?
Well, no. First off, let me answer the last question first, and the answer is generally no. The only real time in and the bears that are in the environments that we go to, these are not grizzly bears. Grizzlies are a whole different sort of situation because of their aggressive nature, and we don't go in areas where there's grizzly bears. These are brown bears, which are not nearly as large, and they're nowhere near as aggressive as grizzlies. And with brown bears, it's actually the opposite advice. You want to look as big as you can. You want to stand up. You want to stretch your arms over your head, bang on things, and that will, if they're, that's a bear that's starting to wander into your vicinity and you don't want them anywhere near you, you do that. Generally, encounters with bears, and this is in fact true. I tell people in the campground when we're close to civilization that our likelihood of seeing a bear there is far greater than seeing one in the backcountry, because there's this big thing called a garbage dumpster in the campground, and that's what the bears are coming to check out.
Coming for dinner.
Exactly. And the other thing is that during the solo, the participants are fasting. They don't have any food with them. They take water, but no food. And so there's no scent of food around them. There's no cooking smells that attract the bears into campgrounds sometimes. And so there's really nothing there the bear wants. Anyway, if there was a time to be least fearful about bears coming to see you, it's when you're on a solo and fast on a quest, because there's no food around for them. And so the chances of seeing them, the only time that you could potentially, what I've just described doesn't work, is if you are out walking around and you somehow get in between a mother bear and a cub. And now the mother bear is looking out for that cub, and you just need to very, slowly and methodically and carefully back your way back out of that situation and leave the vicinity.
Okay,
but,
so
we've actually never seen cubs out there.
Oh, you have seen cubs?
We have not in this area.
Hey, I've never seen cubs. Yeah, they're probably hiding, I would imagine. So do you ever talk about the animals? Because I'm aware in Native American culture and some other traditions that people have adopted and learned from, that people use animal totems. They look at the types of animals that appear to them during a wilderness quest, and they might try to learn from that. Do you work with that at all?
We do, particularly when they show up in the stories. And there's a couple of schools of thought on this. We do. I mentioned earlier the 4 directions wheel, and there are some different animals that are associated with each of those 4 directions that are sort of symbolic, or there's something about the nature of that animal that helps tie it into the idea of the direction and the aspect of the human self. And we offer those up, and we hold it. Mike and I, when we guide, we hold it very lightly. It's more. I believe it's more valuable if you come back and you say, all through my solo there was this red-tailed hawk that was sitting in a tree near me and was flying around. I could see him just about every day. To me, I'm more interested in how you felt when you saw that hawk, or what you were perceiving from that hawk, as opposed to telling you, oh, well, in Native American culture, the hawk is this, or that means that you're going to experience the following 5 things when you get home. Rather than doing that, I find it far more valuable to listen to how people engaged with it, with the animal, with and it's not just animals, it's the trees and the sky and the clouds, and what did they see when they looked up? Because it's all based on this idea that that what I experience out there and how I describe it, how I interact with it, is going to be in some way or another some sort of reflection on something about me and my life and my experience. And that happens on these programs, not just with animal encounters. It also happens with just sort of, the stuff we have to do. I'll never forget on a trip in Death Valley years ago I was on. There was a young woman who came out. She had never even been camping of any kind, and this was a version that we used to do when we backpacked into base camp sites. And our first night in base camp, we had a lot of wind come up, and she was lying in her sleeping bag under her tarp. And the next thing she knows, a corner of her tarp came undone. And she's lying there in terror. She'd never slept outside. She'd never been alone in the dark. There was some story of abuse in her background. So she just had all kinds of reasons to be fearful. And she told the story the next morning about laying there in her bag. And she just knew that if she didn't tie that tarp down, it was gonna start getting shredded in the wind, and she would have no tarp for the rest of the trip. So she told a story of getting all her courage up, getting out of her bag, going out into the dark, tying the tarp down, and then getting back under the tarp that night. And as she's telling the story, it's like she could have gone home then. She could have, because she's telling it, she's beaming with pride. She found a place, in her story, I found a place of that I got braver than I thought I was. I've got courage. I've got it in me because I just did that scary thing last night. So it's experiences like that sometimes that are even the real meat and the meaning for people, as not just the animal encounters.
Well, that brings up actually another question that I had, because you were talking about her personal realizations and transformations during this experience. What are some other kinds of transformations that you've seen in people over the years?
Mm-hmm. Oh, just, they run the gamut. We had a few years ago, we had a young man. He had literally just graduated high school, and drove all the way to Colorado by himself from, I believe it was either Ohio or Michigan, to do the program. And it was interesting because we kind of said that, he showed up and he was the youngest by far on the trip, and he immediately had like 6 or 7 uncles, as older men that were there, or older compared to him, that were there to sort of help and support him. And he went up. He picked, probably as young men sometimes will do, he picked one of the most challenging places in the whole area where we were camped, up on the very top of a peak, to set up his camp for his solo time. Buffeted by wind the whole time he was up there. Came down, and it sounds trite to say the boy became a man, but there was that level of transformation. You could see it in his face, you could hear it in his story, you could hear it in his voice, the way he carried himself. He ended up from there. Then he spent a year or two in the AmeriCorps program. He was traveling around the country doing service projects in inner cities, and then ended up being on a firefighting corps for the Forestry Service for a period of time. And he came back the next year. He was in the area with the Forest Service, and he came back and met us up with the next year's group. And he literally, he was a different person. I mean, he had grown and matured so much just from that experience. And then on the other side, there was we had a man one year that was sort of in that approaching retirement place. And the stories he told about, going out feeling sort of, well, I've sort of done it all. I'm old. I'm ready to hang it up. My body's not what it used to be. And then to come back with the stories of how he passed his time and how he engaged with the wildness around him, and rediscovering some level of wildness in his heart at the same time. And while the first story I described was a young man growing up, this was like an older man reconnecting to his youth even. So it almost like was bringing back the opposite direction from a chronological standpoint anyway. Lots of stories like that over the years. Lots of stories of, like the young woman I was describing before, with finding the courage to face the challenges in her life and taking that home with her.
Wow, Tom. So I'm thinking, this is Kathryn, I'm just chiming in now. So I'm thinking 3 days and 3 nights alone could be a little scary. I'm even thinking for myself, as a woman. Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give to people to deal with, the fears they might have of being alone out there for that many days?
Well, we spend, as I said, we spend the first 3 days together on the trip. In the group, camping together in a base camp setting. And so we sort of little by little step people into that experience. We don't just the very first day there, send them off to be alone in the wilderness like that. So it's a little bit of a stepping into it process that we use. And we spend a lot of time just being very matter of fact with dealing with what they're going to encounter and what they need to do to stay safe. It's like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to get cold. Okay. So we talked about some things you can do if you're cold. Do you know how to do those? Yes, I've got it. Okay. Can you do that for yourself? Yes, I can do that for myself. So we sort of deal with the practicalities of how to stay safe. And then in the council settings, then that's the opportunity to sort of invite people to embrace that fear and to find ways to use it to find something new about themselves. My wife has done this program, we actually did a version together, a couples version it's offered on a limited basis through Rites of Passage. And then she's also done this on her own. And she is not a person, she will tell you, for her, camping out is the Holiday Inn instead of the Ritz-Carlton. So she is not, would not describe herself as an outdoors person. And her stories when she came back about finding the courage in the dark is part of what she treasures now than what she's found out about herself from having been through that.
So what makes the Wilderness Quest different than other programs? I've encountered some other programs like Forest School and Nature School and different things like that. How is this different than other programs or experiences that people might encounter?
There's different sorts of, the thing that a lot of people ask me about because they have maybe some experiences like Outward Bound and some of those programs that have some of these elements in them. This is, well, what makes us different from some of those programs is really, I think, more of the inner experience. It's not as much about sort of the challenge, going through challenging situations to, that are more physical in nature. This is really more about the inner journey, I would say, in a wilderness sort of a setting. I would say, though, that what makes this really different from other sorts of spiritual experiences is the interaction with the natural environment. One of the things that I learned early on when I was going through my guide training program from Mike Bodkin, who was my teacher, he said, don't ever forget that on any trip that we do together, Tom, there's actually three guides here. There's you, me, and there's all of the natural environment. And the natural environment brings a huge element to the opportunity for people to learn and to grow and to reflect. And I personally have done all sorts of other sort of workshops and retreats and study programs and meditation experiences and various things like that. And all those are valuable, all those are powerful, but I think the opportunity to engage in a natural world like you have with the Quest it cannot be duplicated. It's very, very unique.
I think that
there's something that just absolutely I experience every time I lead a program. Even I feel like the cells of my body change from the beginning of the program to the end. Just the pace, the quiet, all of those elements that work on me.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, Tom, because I think, nature is such a balancing, healing agent. And I was just reading about kids with ADD and ADHD, and they're looking, for different ways to help them. And the most effective has been nature therapy. We're taking, not necessarily a vision quest, but getting them out in nature, because I think we're so far removed from the elements and all the great teachings of nature. So I think it's awesome what you're doing. And so I know people that are listening in the show are going to want to do your program. So how do we pair, and how do people find you if they want to do one of your programs?
Well, what I would recommend is that they go on the website, and it's simply wildernessquest.org, wildernessquest.org, and that's the website for Rites of Passage, which is the organization that puts these on. When you get to the website, you're going to see more information about the things we've been talking about, more description about, is this right for you? Are you experiencing any of these sorts of things? And if you are, here's where it might fit for you, and, to sort of help somebody figure out if this is in fact right for them. And then there's also a listing of programs on there with upcoming dates. The next one we have is in mid-May. It's May 16th through 24th. That one is a co-gender trip, men and women, be led by two guides, a man and a woman. So it'll be, great if a woman hearing this wants to go experience this. After that, the next trip is the one I was describing earlier. That's a men's trip that I co-lead in Colorado every year, and that's June 20th through 28th. But then there's other dates on there and listings as well. And they can certainly, when they're on there, of course, sign up for the email list. It's like, well, it sounds interesting. I want to do it one day, maybe next year or the year after. and I don't want to forget about this. Well, go ahead and sign up for the email list, and you'll get notifications as new trips are coming up. And they send out just a few emails a year. They're not going to bomb your inbox. But that's a good way to stay in touch. And, as life, unfolds and you get the opportunity to do it, then maybe that's a good way to remember that it's out there.
And so, Tom, I'm also thinking, anything that people can do to enhance their physical health is going to be a plus, because if they're going to be out in the wilderness for a couple of days, the stronger their body, the better, right? So people could start working on their health.
Oh, absolutely. In terms of preparing for the trip, yes. We recommend that people start doing some things like cutting back on the use of tobacco or alcohol in the weeks leading up. Getting out and just walking. There's a little bit of backpacking that is involved in these trips, so load up your pack and go for a hike in the park and do some things like that to make sure that you're physically ready. And having said that, people with all sorts of physical, levels of physical ability have come out and done these programs and had wonderful experiences. When you go off on your solo, you don't have to go very far from base camp in order to have a private experience. And so, we can adopt to just about anything that anybody brings in terms of their physical, conditioning out to the program.
Well, Tom, thank you for being on with us today. That's the sign that our show is over. It's already come to an end, but please stay on the line after we sign off, and we'll chat with you for just a few minutes before you go. We love having all of you with us, and please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. This has been Spirits Journey live on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio.